broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Houston, Texas. It's time for Houston Business Radio. Now, here's your host.
Hello, Houston. Trisha Stetzel here, bringing you another episode of Houston Business Radio. Today's guest is Debbie Longo, executive behavioral coach and founder of Life in Bloom, New York. With more than 20 years of experience in leadership development and behavioral strategy, Debbie helps executives and business owners identify and shift the patterns that hold back performance, profitability, and culture. She is also the host of two podcasts, Behavioral Profit and the Six Figure Shift Show, where she shares how subtle changes in behavior and mindset can create major business results. Debbie's approach blends behavioral psychology with practical, real-world tools, and her mission is simple: help leaders shift behavior, lead with impact, and unlock growth that lasts. Debbie, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm very excited to have you on the show today. So tell us a little bit more about Debbie, and then I want to dive into Life in Bloom.
Okay, so I've been in this business for about 25 years, and I had a spiritual teacher until 2021, until she died, when she died of cancer. So now I'm on my own, but I was doing a lot of things with her. And so I was kind of doing some things independently also. So it kind of just was a flow, just a natural flow that I could just turn around and start my own business because it was very sudden that she passed away. So that was exactly what I did.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry to hear of the passing, but it does sound like that's part of your story and how you started this business that you're in. So, talk to me about behavioral, psychological, psychology, and coaching, especially in this executive space. How do all these things come together, Debbie, in your
So
practice?
thank you for that. So the reason why I call it behavioral is because I'm focusing on it's almost natural to say that it has to do with psychology, okay? But I'm focusing
Mhm.
on the behaviors of the employees and the executives and the business owners, which based on what their behaviors are exactly, right? Most of the time negative and how it's negative, that's decreasing
Mhm.
sales and profits. So just by changing their behavior, I can increase sales and profits, okay? So people think that it has to do with psychology. What I do is actually the opposite of that. Okay.
Okay.
Because I don't want it to sound like and be traditional psychology. Okay. If you believe in that, that's fine. But I'm just going to say that there are people, individual people, business owners, all kinds of people that have tried that and that does not work. But if it works for you, then that's fine. But I'm focusing on the people that it doesn't work for, that need help, that have decreasing sales and profits, that are going out of business. Maybe they file bankruptcy,
Mm.
recently, or, and then they really need to get back on their feet again. Maybe they can't afford to put food on the table for their family. Maybe they can't afford to put gas in the car. These are real world things that happen, all the time, right? They're happening now, right? As we're speaking. So, there's a lot of things here and a lot of people need help. But if they're going to seek the help, then they're going to want to do it. They're going to have to see that just a little bit, even there's something wrong, just even a tiny bit, and that this will help them increase sales and profits 100% because I know, because I've been doing it 25 years and I know exactly what's going to happen and I don't have to be a psychic to know.
Because you've seen it over and over and over again.
Right.
So I heard you say that this negative behavior, these negative behavioral patterns are what's limiting growth and profitability.
Right.
How do you help shift that mindset from negative to something that's not negative?
Right. So there's about 100 different ways. So what I do is I give people a free consultation. okay, and possibly two. So, and then I fill out, I have them fill out things, a survey and, some questionnaires and different things. And then I make a plan for them. I make a whole outline for them, okay? And then I give it to them and I discuss it with them. And then it's their decision, okay, whether they want to go through that or not, right? So that's basically my process. But I can tell you that there's control in the workplace where the executives are trying to control the employees, and also vice versa, okay, where the employees could come in and they could just do whatever they want, right? They don't focus on job duties, or they're doing insubordination, where the executives are telling them what to do and they're blatantly just not doing it. There's so many things, but a control is a very big thing, because here's the thing: if a company starts doing good, then it's natural that the executive or business owner, their ego is going to start to grow. Okay. And when they
Mm.
do that, right, then they try to control more. But I teach it that there really is no control. You can make goals. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think every company should make goals, but we don't know if you're going to reach those goals or not, and that's why it's called that's why it's called goals. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
right. And the last thing that I want to say is when I am doing something physical, okay, so the mind controls what I do physically, right? When I do something
Mhm.
physical, right, I want to be able to produce results, like we said, like making goals and helping people, okay, speaking nice to people, respecting people, where it could
Mhm.
be anybody in the company, okay? And when I do things like that, those thoughts turn into physical things that I do, okay? So I might, throw papers around, okay, which these things are very common. They might sound like people don't do this, right? Like executives don't do this, right? But that's what they do. This is all stuff that's realistic, okay? They might, just throw a pen, or something at an employee, okay, not even realizing it.
Mhm.
So just expressing anger in all different ways. They don't have to be yelling and screaming, at the employee or something in order for them to get the point across that they're being angry, and that creates a lot of negativity. I want the employees to be excited to wake up and be excited to go to work every morning, that they have the best job on earth and they love everybody in their workplace and they love their bosses and they're going to respect them and they're really, really excited to go to work every day. That's the workplace that should be happening.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that culture shift where everyone is happy to be in the workplace. So,
Right.
in your work, Debbie, are you working with just the leaders or are you working with the entire team?
Right. So I start off with the leaders, business owners and executives, usually is what it is. And then if they have a problem, a widespread problem, right, with the company, then as it grows with them, okay, I would suggest to, can we do a team call where we
Mm.
have all the employees on? Can we do groups, small groups? Okay. Or can we do maybe one on one with the client and a few employees, or one employee, different things like that. So that really depends on what the situation is. Okay. So everything that I do is tailor made to that client, right? To that organization, because there are so many different scenarios. I can't even really give you really like an outline, of what that would be. But the idea is to fix the whole workplace, right? So,
Yeah.
however I have to do that is how I'm going to do it. Okay. Providing that the business owner is willing to do that. So if they say, oh, I just want you to help just me, and that's all this the problem is just me, and I know that's not true. And then I say okay, and then as we go along, I'm helping him, and then he sees that it's working. And then he might
Mm.
say, "Oh, I have one employee that has this problem." Meanwhile, he's got like 20 employees. "I have one employee that has this problem." "Okay, can you help that one employee?" "Okay, so we'll do that." Then he says, "I have another employee." So this is common. That we start off
Mm.
gradually, unless he really knows the problem. And then he says, we gotta, I know there's a problem with everybody, and, everybody has to leave. I gotta fire everybody, which is like it's a horrible way to do business, because then he's going to get more people. The problem is going to continue, right? Because he didn't solve the problem to begin with, and then he's going to fire everybody, and then the cycle's just going to keep going on. I have a store across the street from me that I buy vegetables from, and that's what they do. That's exactly what they do.
Mm.
And they just did it again. So this is that's why there's so many different examples. And these are things that happen. It's not, this is not like,
Mm.
if you've never saw this before, then if you're listening to this podcast, then you've just never seen it. But I could tell you that it's common.
Absolutely. Well, and oftentimes it's the leader that needs the cultural shift, right? And so probably why they continue to fire the entire team and hire a whole new team and have the same problem because they didn't get to the root of it, which is in
Right.
between their ears.
Right.
I'm just guessing. It happens, right?
Yeah.
So you described the negativity and how some of that may be seen physically in the workplace, maybe throwing a paper or throwing a pen. And so we see that negativity when you're working with teams and you actually see that cultural shift from that negativity to positivity. What does that look like in the workplace and how does it impact performance and revenue in a business?
Well, if it a lot of times it happens pretty quickly. Okay. It's
Okay.
unless it's a serious, serious issue and it has to be done very gradually. But even though if I give them a plan and I say, oh, it might take months and months and months, they're going to most likely 9 times out of 10 start to see results almost immediately, right? Within like maybe a week or a month or something like that. And that's just because the way that I work, right? Because I know,
Mhm.
what's going to happen, right? So, when I see that, that's why when I start to see that change, right? The business owner, the client is seeing that also. Now, it's a lot of times somebody sees the gifts that we get or the positivity, somebody else sees it before we see it in ourselves. Okay? So, that happens a lot. Okay, but again, there's so many different situations, but you can see it's like literally a miracle coming true. Because if somebody knows that they cannot fix themselves, it cannot happen. It's impossible. And I just sit there and I'm like, okay, and I just listen because it's only words, because it's not true what they're saying, because I know that I could fix whatever it is. It's, it doesn't matter what it is, but they don't see it
Mhm.
that way because they don't know. Okay, so
Right.
there's a lot of things here, but it's a huge transition to go from negative to positive. There's so many different ways that I could feel it. That the business owner can identify it. It's just hundreds of ways. I do something negative, and then I'm not doing that thing anymore, right? So that's positive.
Right.
It's the opposite,
That's good. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the things that we think about and practice the most do become our reality, whether it's negative or positive. And we push that into culture in our businesses. So we're about halfway through, Debbie, and I'm sure that there are people who want to connect with you already. What is the best way for them to get connected with you?
Sure. Well, I have a website, Life in Bloom, NY for New York. And they can fill out a contact form and everything on there. They can also look on the website because I have a lot of information on there too. And I'm on LinkedIn. Okay. They can just punch in my name, Debbie Longo, and it'll come up. It comes up as revenue strategist on LinkedIn only because I'm doing audits right now. So, but it's part of the coaching thing. So if they, get in touch with me, I can explain it. So, but it's really the same thing. But so those are probably the two primary ways.
Okay, fantastic, Debbie. So you guys, lifeinbloomny.net is where you want to go, or you can look up Debbie, Debbie, Longo, Longo, Life in Bloom NY on LinkedIn and connect with her there. That's how she and I found each other, is on LinkedIn. So, Debbie, let's jump back into the conversation that we were having, and I'd like to tie this into burnout. So we talked about moving from negative to positive, creating unlimited growth and profitability in these businesses. Can we talk about how burnout plays into the negative side of things and can maybe carry over when they're first building this growth and profitability?
Sure. Well, it produces negativity, obviously, which is the most important thing that we don't want. Um, but if I'm burned out, the common sense part of it is that I get very tired, right? And I get sick and tired of being like this, having this attitude, doing these things, okay? And this could be anybody, an employee or a business owner or whatever. But a lot of times the thing is that the burnout comes from, what does it come from? Overworked and underpaid. So if the
Mm,
boss says, and again, this is another common issue, the boss says, "Oh, the person works till 5, right?" I know a lot of people work online and people work different hours, right? So I'm just giving an example, okay? The person works till 5, and the boss comes and pats them on the back and says it's like 4:30 and says, "Oh, can you just stay an extra hour to do this one thing for me?" And then the person says, okay. The next day, the boss does the same thing. The person says, okay. The next day, the boss does the same thing. Now the employee is annoyed, okay, because they have things to do. And maybe they have to pick up their kids from school. Okay. They might have to cook dinner or whatever. And the employee doesn't want to say no because the employee thinks that she's going to get fired. Okay. And
mhm,
she says yes. And then the paycheck comes, the end of the week comes, she gets the paycheck. She didn't get paid for any of those hours. Okay. So it's like
mm,
3 or 4 hours in one week. Okay. That they would say, oh, excuse me. They would say, oh, just do a little bit of this work. Right. Sorry.
no
When they
worries.
know that that's work is going to take an hour. That boss knows
Mhm,
that that work is going to take an hour. And then he says, "Oh, can you just do a little bit of this? It's not going to take that long." And then they're there,
mhm,
you know what I mean? They're there for an hour. So this is the thing. So that is a huge thing that bosses do. And then they feel that because the employee said that they would do it, that the boss doesn't have to pay them. Now they get
mhm.
resentments. The employee gets a resentment. The boss, they have an argument about something, and then they get very angry. And then the employee now doesn't care, right? Because of all this that's happening, because she's not getting paid. And then the
Right.
boss says, we are going to have to come to an agreement that either you're going to leave or you're going to get fired. Okay. And now the employee loses her job when none of this had to happen at all. Okay. If the boss would just pay, if you ask somebody, if the job duty and the contract that you signed with that company is 9 to 5, if you ask one employee or anybody to work 1 minute past 5, that is the manager's or the executive's duty. Okay, ethically and morally and legally too, to pay
Mhm.
that employee. That's what the employee is there for, to get a paycheck and to, be, like what they're doing or whatever, right? But this is the thing. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of examples of this, right? But to me, this is like the most common sense thing. And it's also the most common.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we talk a little bit about Six Figure Shift Show, which is one of your podcasts? I'd love to hear a little bit about the show and if it's, I don't, is it a solo podcast? Are you inviting guests and what that looks like?
Right. So I have two podcasts, Behavioral Profit and Six Figure Shift Show. But what happened was people were, because I have a form for people to fill out, right? And I have a lot of episodes. I have like 25 episodes in like 3 months. Okay. So what
Wow.
people would know, what people were doing was they were filling out, they were starting to fill out the application for the behavioral profit. And then they realized they didn't qualify because they couldn't answer the questions. So they called me
Mm.
or, on email or whatever, got in touch with me and said, I don't qualify for this. And I said, why? And then they said, well, this is my business. I do this and that, this and that. So I made a show. It all started with one person. Okay. So I made a show just for, I know it's like, this is what I do, right? I'll do it, anything for anybody. It's like weird. So I made a show just for somebody. Then somebody else came along, the same thing happened. And then somebody else came, the same thing happened, right? So now I have the show. But the whole thing is on behavioral profit, okay? But it
Mhm.
indicates it, right? It tells you in the beginning, even in the title, right? It'll say Six Figure Shift Show, but it's all on behavioral profit. But eventually I'm going to separate it, okay? And the behavioral profit is exactly what I talked about in the beginning of this podcast in my introduction. It's the opposite of psychology. I don't do psychology, okay? I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. I'm not certified, okay, in that field. Not only would it be illegal for me to do, right? But this is what I'm trying to not to do, okay? Because for so many people, it just doesn't work, right? And I'm the type of person that even if it's virtual, right? I'm not sitting at a desk, okay? They're showing me, their office through the camera, through video conferencing or whatever. It's a very on hands-on thing, believe it or not, even though I'm not really there. Right. So there's all different things. Sometimes I have them put up posters like in their office, like think positive, different things like that. It's called visual manifestation. That's what it's called. But that's
Okay.
another whole story.
That's another podcast, I think, Debbie. Don't
Right.
start another one.
Right, exactly.
Don't start another one. Tell me who are your best clients? I know that they need to want and and they need to want change. They need to want to get from negativity to positivity, but who are your typical clients that you work with?
Right. So believe it or not, okay, like any business or anything, the people who are familiar with your business are most likely going to be your best clients, okay? From the fast food store, you know, restaurant, all the way up to, stockbroker, financial company, okay? Because they're going to understand really what you're doing, okay? And they're going to 100% believe in it rather than trying to convince somebody to believe in it, okay? So the people that really understand, and anybody, I can help anybody. They don't have to be in this specific field, okay? But I'm just doing it for the purposes of answering your question and just making sure that, this is clear, which is fine. The question is fine, okay? So, people who are in the health field, in the mental field,
Hmm.
natural health, chiropractors, RN,
Hmm.
okay?
Okay.
Astrologer. I had an astrologer on my show once. Um,
Okay.
Maybe medical doctor, because a lot of times medical doctors now they teach about health and holistic, different things like that, okay? But most of the time, a massage therapist. Okay, I had another
Mm.
guest too that was a massage therapist. I had one that was a psychotherapist also. I have had another guest too. But she was a coach and she did other things too. She just didn't do your typical talk therapy. She did other things also. So people who are in the holistic field, okay, and
Hmm.
who understand mental health and who go
Mm,
beyond giving medication, what we teach in the Western world. Okay. Take a pill and that'll solve your problem. You have anger. Okay. I'm going to prescribe you some medication. Just take a pill. Okay.
mhm.
If you're in a depression because of why, there's a lot of reasons why, right? I'm going to give you a pill. Just
Absolutely.
take this, right? And then you'll get out of the depression. It works. And then this is just my experience. If you're taking the pills and it's fine, that's great. But a lot of people, it works and then it doesn't work anymore. And then they come back to it because they haven't solved the problem in the first place.
Right. And one pill leads to the next pill, to the next
Right.
pill. And by then we're just masking side effects
Right.
of all of the things, right, that we're putting into our bodies. So I love that you have a lot of clients that are in the holistic space. I love that we take care of people holistically from business all the way to personal and sleep and all of the things that we should be doing. But I also understand that you can help anybody out there who's looking
Right.
to move from this negative space to this positive space. So as we wrap up today, I have one more question for you.
Sure.
Your company's called Life in Bloom. So
Hmm.
if you could leave our listeners with one piece of advice about how leaders can truly bloom in both business and life, what would it be?
Think about what we talked about today on this podcast, everything that we spoke about, and think if you can relate to anything. If you can relate to one single teeny drop of one part of any sentence that we talked about in this podcast, then think about if you might need help in any way, shape, or form. And also, you can do an inventory yourself. You know your workday, you know your workplace. Okay, take a piece of paper, say, this is the start of my workday. And as things go on, write it down. This one was angry at me. I was angry at that one, and then do an inventory. And then by the end of the day, look at that. Okay. And that will tell you most likely, okay, what your problem is, right? So these are things that people can do on their own, but that's not going to solve the problem. That's going to tell you what the problem is. That's it.
Mhm. Okay. And then you're going to help them get to the core and actually
Right.
make the shift.
Right. That's the point. Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Debbie, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you for coming on with me today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It was fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you guys, if you want to connect with Debbie, of course, all of this will be in the show notes. So, if you're sitting in front of your computer, you can just point and click. Otherwise, when you get home from listening to this in your car, you can visit Life in Bloom NY for New York.net, or you can connect with Debbie on LinkedIn, DebbieLongo, and it will also say Life in Bloom NY there. Debbie, again, it has been such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you having me. Thank you.
That's all the time we have for today. If you found this conversation that I had with Debbie today of value or even of greater value than you could have ever imagined, then please share it with a fellow entrepreneur, a veteran, or a Houston business leader ready to grow. Be sure to follow, rate, and review the show. It helps us reach more bold business minds just like yours. And your business, your leadership, and your legacy are built one intentional step at a time. So stay inspired, stay focused, and keep building the business and the life you deserve.